guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be discussing Genesis 30 through 36. This is 2 days worth of reading. Yesterday was a day in the office and it just got really crazy, so I didn't have a lot of time to recap after I read. I did my reading, which actually yesterday would have been Genesis 30 through 33, but I just decided that today I was just going to do one video for both days of reading so that I can stay consistent and keep you guys abreast of what's going on in this book, because it's just so much in the book of beginnings. As a matter of fact, Genesis goes all the way to chapter 50 and we're only at chapter 36 at this point, so we still have 14 more chapters in this book, and I'm still super stoked about everything that I have read so far. So let's unpack what's going on in these chapters. Okay, so first, chapter 30 was when Rachel and Leah were basically at odds. I didn't realize that they were at odds. I knew that Jacob had worked for 7 years to get Rachel, but he didn't end up getting Rachel. He ended up getting Leah first, and then he had to work another 7 years to get Rachel. And then he ended up actually working another 6 more years to tend to Laban's flocks and everything, but that's a whole nother story. So in essence, he worked 20 years just so that he could get these 2 women. But he had Leah first. Leah wanted to be loved by Jacob. He did not love her. He thought he was marrying Rachel, and he appeased her and abided in his marriage the way that he was supposed to. So he, was still physical with her and still, had sex with her or consummated their marriage and continued to have sex with her, but he didn't love her, at least not like he loved Rachel. So Leah felt like Rachel took her husband from her, and they were really at odds with each other. Rachel couldn't get pregnant, so she was very jealous, very jealous. So as a result of her jealousy, she did the exact same thing that Sarah did with her handmaid. She gave Jacob her handmaid so that he could get pregnant, and so that the handmaid could get pregnant and give her a baby. And she did this quite a few times, but meanwhile, Leah was just popping the babies out, popping them out. So Rachel was only able to give Jacob 2 sons, and that was Joseph and Benjamin. And this is the same Joseph that had the coat of many colors that's later on where the sons were, the brothers were jealous of him and sold him into slavery to the king, and then they eventually had to meet up with him, but we aren't in that story yet, so we'll get back to that, because that's going to be super interesting too. I remember that from childhood. But Rachel only had 2 sons, but in the process of the time that she died at like 80, so in the process of her years being married to Jacob, she was jealous. She didn't have any children before she had Joseph. It was a while before she had any children, so she was really jealous. She gave him her servant. Her servant was Bilhah, and Bilhah was able to give him Dan and Naphtali. Like, those were the 2 sons that she had for him, but all of the other children came from Leah and Leah's servant Zilpah. And he had 12 sons altogether and 1 daughter. So, like I said, they went through all of the shenanigans with Rachel and Leah being at odds with each other. God remembered Rachel and he blessed her womb. So she was able to have her first biological son, not by her handmaid, but by, through natural childbirth to Joseph. And then time went past. Jacob felt like he wanted to end this whole thing with Laban, and he wanted to leave and to go and live his own life with his own family, children, livestock, all of that. So he asked Laban to release him from whatever covenant agreement they had, to release him because he served long enough. And Laban never paid him what he was supposed to pay him. He changed what he was going to pay him 10 times while he was working for him over that 14 years. And he still worked, and he still, helped him become wealthy. And Laban really didn't want to let him go, because he knew that while Jacob was there, he prospered. Like, he, gained wealth. He had really healthy livestock. His property was flourishing, and it was healthy and everything. He knew that as long as Jacob was there, God saw favor on him, so he didn't want him to leave. Well, Jacob thought a whole little scheme, and when he asked to be released, Laban was like, no. So he was like, okay, this is what I'll do. So if you let me go, I'll only take the speckled or blemished flock. And he was really, really smart. He was really smart because he set it up that the spotted animals that he took, he left all of the like one color. So if they were all black or all white, they stayed with Laban. But he set it up so that he put like plants or shrubs in between the flock, so that when it was mating time, he would put it up so that the males would only mate with the speckled, his flock. So they would eventually bear children that were also speckled. So every time it was mating season, he would do this. So the offspring of Laban's flock will always come out speckled. So then they will become Jacob. So he eventually had a whole lot, and he took his stuff, took his children, and he was like, all right, we up out of here. We're taking all of our stuff, and left. Laban then went out to see if he could catch him, because he heard that he felt like Jacob robbed him. So he was in pursuit of him, and God came to him in his dream and was like, hey, I understand that you might be upset, but when you see Jacob, you don't say anything good or bad to him, or I'll send a curse on your family, send a curse on your household. So Laban was still mad. He was persistent. He still went out there. He talked to Jacob, and but also Rachel took his idols. Rachel took Laban's idols. Jacob didn't know that, but Rachel took Laban's idols. So when Laban caught up to Jacob, when he pursued him after Jacob and his family left, he said, you guys took my stuff. Like, y'all took my stuff. And Jacob was like, no, search all of our property, search all of our tents. If you find your stuff, whoever has it will surely die. God will pass judgment, and they'll surely die. Well, Rachel had his gods in the satchel, but she was sitting on it, and he searched everybody, but she was real tricky, real cunning. Y'all know Rachel was sneaky. So she was like, oh, I don't feel well, I'm on my cycle, so if I don't stand to greet you, that's why. But it was basically because she was hiding what he was looking for. So he didn't find it, and Jacob still didn't know that she had it, but Jacob had already placed a curse over whoever took the gods, because he said whoever has the gods, that God would punish them, and they would surely die. I mean, it didn't happen right away, of course, because Rachel lived to have another baby, which was Benjamin. But that was what happened. So Laban was like, he came out and he was like, I don't understand, you took my family. He was like, no, is anything in here that's yours? No. You told me I could have the speckled flock. You told me that I could have, my daughter. I mean, your daughters are my wives. He was like, no, but those are my kin. You took my daughters, you took my grandchildren. He was like, no, those are my children. Those are my wives. I didn't take anything other than what belonged to me. And he said, as sure as the day is, we need to sit down and we need to make a covenant that nobody will go against each other. And that's where that one of those prayers that we always say, may the Lord watch between me and thee while we're absent one from another. So they said that prayer, and they basically were like setting up a pillar and making a covenant between the two of them that they wouldn't seek each other out anymore. Like, that was the end of it. Like, once they left from that spot, that they would no longer pursue each other, and what he had is his and what Jacob had was his. So, but they were like backing away from each other, looking at each other as opposed to walking away from each other back to back. So he sent all his flocks and people across the ford, but the that night was when he got into a fight with God, and he was wrestling the guy. He was wrestling, and the 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 guy was like, "Just give in." He was like, "No, I'm not gonna let you go till you bless me." And that's when he, in the story, I don't know if any of you guys heard of the story, but that's when the guy reached into his hip and into the hollow of his hip and like pulled it out of joint. And he said, you know, your name will no longer be Jacob, but this is where your name becomes Israel. So this is when his name changed, when he wrestled with God, and it says, because he you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome. So because Jacob persevered even through that fight, God changed his name to Israel. And the place that they were wrestling was Peniel. I don't really know what the significance is, but I do know the significance of his name being changed from Jacob to Israel, and that being a part of the promise. And that's where the Israelites came from. His 12 tribes, or his 12 sons, being rulers of nations. The Israelites fall in that 12 tribes, and that's where the beginning of the promise coming to pass was. Like, even though he had already started having children from all of his from his wives and, you know, his handmaidens or their handmaidens, this is where the promise is being brought to pass in his life. So after they left, they were going back to their hometown because Jacob said, "Oh, I want to go back. I want to, you know, appeal to my brother and let him know that his servant loves him." So when he was headed back, remember, Esau was at odds with him because he tricked his brother out of his birthright as well as his birth blessing, like the blessing that the father was supposed to was supposed to pass to him. He stole it based off of Rebecca, what Rebecca told him to do, his mom. So all the time that he was gone, he was hoping that Esau had gotten over it. So on his journey back, he was just thinking about it. He couldn't let it go. So he was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to separate everybody up. I'm going to separate these livestock with these group of people. Y'all go this way. Y'all go this way. Y'all go this way. Y'all go that way. But Rachel and Joseph, he kept behind him. Everybody else he sent before them, but in separate flocks. And that was basically so that as Esau was headed towards them, as he encountered them, they would say, "Oh, we're for you. Your servant Jacob wanted us to be a gift to you." So he kept coming. But meanwhile, Esau was coming towards Jacob and his family with 400 of his people. I guess his men, his troops or whatever. So naturally, Jacob thought that, oh, he's coming to kill me. Okay, so I gotta, you know, be humble and bow myself to him and let him know that I love him and I'm truly sorry, and that, you know, can we start over? So as each group of flocks, livestock, and people encountered Esau, it, you know, it just, I guess for Esau it was kind of weird because he embraced Jacob when he did finally get to him, and he was like, oh, you know, what is all this? I have all that I need in my country. You keep your stuff. He was like, no. Please take this as a peace offering, love offering. Take this. I want it to be yours, and so that we can have covenant with each other. So, of course, Esau eventually gave it and was like, okay, fine. But I can't remember what was happening, but Jacob wanted to stop in the nearby city because he said that his family and his flock would not make it a whole nother day. And that's when Esau was like, oh, no, I'll go with you. And he was like, no, you go do what you're going to do. We'll stop. And, we'll, refresh, regroup, get up, and keep going the next day. But Esau was like, no, but let me send a few of my men with you. And he was like, no, 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 go do what you got to do. It's not necessary. We'll go this way. You finish doing what you're going to do, and we'll meet you back in your country at a later time. So I think Isaac died. And when he died, that was like right after Jacob returned home to them. But then in the next chapter was the story about Dinah, which was Leah's daughter from Jacob, the only daughter that he had. And it was about Dinah being raped by Shechem, which was Hamar's son. Hamar's son raped her as soon as he saw her, and he decided that he was infatuated with her and he just had to have her. He was in love with her from first start, and he could not control himself. So he defiled her and then asked his father and asked Jacob to allow him to marry her. I don't think Jacob was considering it, but he didn't say anything about it until his sons came home. So when his sons came home, because they were out in the field when all of this was happening, when they heard about it and they came home, Hamor was asking, could Shechem be married to Dinah? So Dinah, I don't think Dinah said anything or did anything, but Jacob was like, wait, what? So the brothers sat down and it was like, the only way that we can consider your son marrying our sister is if all of your men are circumcised. First, you and your father have to be circumcised, and then all of your men in your household have to be circumcised. All the men in your country have to be circumcised. And he and the father were like, sure, we can do it. And they did that immediately. And then they went and talked to the men in their country or in their kingdom, and told them, hey, they're wealthy, they have flock. When we join together, their flock will be our flock, what they have will be ours. So it's only smart for all of us to get circumcised like they're asking. That's not a big ask. Let's just do it. So all of them agreed, and they went back and got circumcised. But what happened, Simeon and Levi realized that it was time for them to attack. So they waited until everybody was within the first 3 days of their circumcision, because I don't know if you know, as an adult getting circumcised, I could only imagine it's no different than any other surgery. Like, you in the recovery phase and you in the healing phase, and you aren't as strong as you were before you went under the knife. So at the third day, they decided that they were going to attack, and they literally slaughtered everybody, all the men in that country. They slaughtered them. And Jacob was upset, and he was like, no, you did this to us. We have to go and make penance for this. So they had to go back to the place that God dwelt, which was Bethel, set up an altar, and offer sacrifice to God to repay what they did, which was try to exact vengeance on the people that hurt their sister. And God saw them, and he forgave them, of course, and delivered them out of that situation. The promise was reminded to him as well. And then shortly after that, Rachel died. She gave birth to Benjamin. That was right when she was giving birth to Benjamin. And she died during childbirth, but Benjamin survived. And and then at the next chapter was literally just going through the lineage of Jacob and Esau, and how the Israelites came about, and then how the Edomites, which were Esau's line, how they came about, and everybody, and rulers and the kingdoms that they ruled, and their children and their grandchildren. It just went through that, and it was a really good reading. It just reiterates that there's nothing new under the sun that happened back then versus what's happening now. Generational curses are strong. I see it in all of these passages in the Bible. But I also understand the sentiment of, being strong and patient in the process, as well as remembering the promise that God gave you, that if He began a good work in you, that He's going to be faithful to fulfill it and to see it through to the end. So you can't always take things into your own hands. However, God does require you to work in your season. Like he requires you to work. There's always work that has to be done in the season of process. There's always work that has to be done. It's not just sitting and waiting. It is working and waiting. So I've really enjoyed these passages. I learned a lot about these people. The connection of the names is what was exciting to me, like Joseph being Rachel's promise, Joseph and Benjamin being Rachel's promise, and then him also being the Joseph from the coat of many colors. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out in the next few chapters. Like I said, there's 50 chapters in Genesis. We're only at Genesis 36, which ended with the lineage of Jacob and Esau. So I'm just looking forward to what is next. I hope that you guys are getting something out of these small chats and discussions about what I've read. I can't really go deep yet because I am still just reading. As God reveals things to me, I will let you guys know what I understand. But it's just really good to be able to read and understand, because there was a point where I could read the Bible and I'd be like, wait, what did he say? I don't get that. But there's so many tools and so many things that can be used to help get understanding and help get clarity. And I am grateful that I have a mind to do it and a heart to do it. And I look forward to what's to come in this series, and I will check you guys back tomorrow in the next check. Bye. Of gratefulness, lift up your voice and sing. Lift up a shout.